Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the speaker who came before for giving an absolutely wonderful overview of why open access is important and data availability statements and all that sort of fun stuff, which means that I don't have to. So that's always very much appreciated. There will be a somewhat similar feeling of theme between the previous talk and this one, because unsurprisingly, we're both talking about two different journal articles with similar sorts of feelings of scope and stuff like that. But I'll go on and talk a bit more about patterns and hopefully explain kind of the differences and what makes patterns for a start. So I'll start off and say, we're here because we're using new technologies to solve important global problems in new ways, right? And you can always tell a data science conference or a computer science conference by how many XKCD cartoons they happen to have. This one count as 3 I've seen, and it's also a repeat of one that was used in another talk yesterday, I think it was. So yes, anyway, there's plenty of those around. I know. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Erin Science come up with. I'm slightly overawed actually about it. It'd be brilliant. Okay, so basically what we're coming to is a situation where everybody in this room, I'm sure, has created data, and you know the faff that goes involved with carefully, lovingly creating data sets and having to manage them, analyze them, look after them, and all that. And we've got all these cool new tools and services like AI and machine learning that we can use to kind of really get into the data and learn really exciting and innovative things. But we've got to be careful about those because, as the saying goes, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right? So we want to be not just using AI and machine learning because it's the new coolest thing, but because it can actually help us solve problems. Fundamentally, we had a discussion about AI ethics earlier this morning, and as editor-in-chief of Patterns, I feel that one of my main themes and main responsibilities as editor-in-chief is to keep that discussion going about data science, AI, machine learning, and the fact that in an awful lot of cases, numbers are actually people, right? We're not just talking about numbers in a spreadsheet. Those numbers can very often correlate to real people who can experience real harm as a result of some of these situations, okay? So anyway, onward. If you ask me what Patterns is all about, it's about sharing data science solutions to problems that cross domain boundaries. And as I've just said, everybody's got data, everybody has very similar sorts of problems with regards to dealing with the data. And what I want to do is share those solutions that are discovered in one domain so that they can be used to solve similar problems in another domain. Because what's happening at the moment is we've got lots of people reinventing the wheel, and because those wheels are ever so slightly different, there is no interoperability, which means we're wasting time, we're wasting effort. It's just making things so much more confusing for everyone. It's just not a good idea. And what I mean when I say about sharing problems across domain boundaries, computer vision systems can count the number of humans in a crowd. Excellent. And what's stopping those algorithms from being tweaked slightly and being used to count the number of endangered species of flowers in a field? I mean, it's that sort of thing I'm thinking about. That's a bit of a simple example, but you get what I mean, I'm sure. So, Patterns got launched in April 2020, right in time for lockdown, right? Now, I knew that when I was brought on to be editor-in-chief, this was going to be a difficult job. I did not quite realize that it would be extra hard mode as a result of happening during the pandemic. But anyway, we published our first issue, and we've been publishing on a monthly basis ever since. So the numbers actually have gone up since I produced this slide. We published over 300 papers, with over 475 research article submissions. Our most read article got read over 30,000 times, right? And we've had articles that have had press releases about them that have been picked up by such really cool places as The Guardian, Martha Stewart Living, The Washington Post, The Economist, you know, really cool places like that. We are very, very much a broad scope and a broad church. We're on Twitter, of course. If you've been following the hashtag, you will have seen our Twitter feed, our Twitter handle at the bottom of every tweet, and that's lovely. Thank you very much. So, When I talk about data and the reason why we need patterns and the reason why we need to be doing data science, applying it to scientific problems, is because it used to be easy. You used to have the situation where data was something that was infinitely precious and how you only had very small amounts of, right? So you didn't have to worry about data publication because that would be, your data would be published as a table in your article. Boom, done, sorted, no problems. They've put this away in the Wellcome collection, unfortunately. These are photos of my own from several years ago now. This is the hard copy of the human genome at the Wellcome collection. They printed it out and they bound it into books. And that bookcase is taller than I am. And the text inside each of the books is really, really small, right? Really small. This is a classic example of, here, we have published this data. It is completely unusable to anyone, except you could probably build a nice kind of fort or treehouse out of it or something like that. We can't, when we're thinking about data, we can't think about human reading, translating data and reading data by human eyes directly into human brains. We have to convert it using, using computer technologies, basically. And of course, I'm sure that everyone here will have a lot of sympathy for this poor PhD student in the cartoon. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to gather the data, interpret it, write about it, and then you boil it all down to this wonderful one perfect slide, and then people don't understand how much effort you've put into creating that thing. So yes, I'm sure you all can sympathize. I know I definitely can. So why do we publish our work? We do it so other people can read it, understand it, and build it. Science is all about making the wonders of your research available and known, so we can develop a corpus of work that can be extended and we can progress as a species, right? So when I talk about the readers of patterns, I generally talk about three sort of semi-distinct groups. In no particular order, they are the researchers in the data-intensive domains who use data to solve problems of scientific and social importance, sorted. They're the people who have the really cool big data sets which are really well looked after and defined and documented and all the rest of it. And they are really quite interested in using some of these newfangled techniques like machine learning, but they're not entirely sure where to start, right? So that's one group. Then we've got the computer and data scientists who are coming up with these cool new algorithms and cool new methods, but they are crying out for well-defined, well-looked-after data sets that they can use to test their algorithms on. And they also are looking for real-world problems, and oftentimes they need the domain researchers' help when, so their AI model spits out an answer. The computer scientist doesn't necessarily know if that answer is actually physically possible or not. That's when you need the domain scientist's expertise to come in and provide that kind of sanity check, so to speak. And then the third group are a group that have kind of traditionally been kind of left over to the sides to do their own thing. They're the data stewards and the engineers who archive, manage, and curate data. They're the people who build and operate the tools and infrastructures that allow researchers to do all this really cool stuff with big data and all the like. These are also the people who are asking the awkward and important questions of, do you really think we should be doing this when it comes to AI and machine learning techniques? They're coming up with standards, they're coming up with best practices, and they're coming up with ethical guidelines and thinking about the potential ramifications of the nature of the research that's being done. Right, so aims and scope, I'm going to skate over this fairly quickly. We bring together as many people as we possibly can who are interested in data. And it's all about sharing knowledge, how to best develop and run data science infrastructures and tools, communicate solutions and best practices for data science algorithms and methodologies. We discuss the human and environmental impact of decisions made using data science quite a lot, because there's a big elephant in the room with AI, namely the fact that it is very, very energy hungry, and that costs a lot in terms of global carbon emissions and the like. And finally, we developed new cross-disciplinary methods for efficient data analysis, processing, archiving, and use as well. So if it's about data, we're interested. There we go. So what sort of thing do we publish? We publish original research articles. We also publish what we call descriptor articles, which are articles about a data science thing. And that data science thing can be a data set, a group of software code, an algorithm, an infrastructure, even hardware, whatever, with permanent links to those research to those data science things. And I'll talk a bit more about the descriptor articles in a little bit. We also have space for opinions and reviews, and also perspective articles and tutorials, which are a bit kind of like somewhere between a review and a research article, or somewhere between the review and an opinion. I'm always delighted to hear people's opinions about things. So if you have a thought of a burning issue that needs to be described to the data science community, please come and talk to me about it, because that would be ace. I'd be really like that. We are a gold open access journal, peer review, obviously. We are also looking into doing transparent peer review as well, although we haven't quite implemented that as yet. So, descriptor article, as I said, an article written about a data science thing. And that's really quite useful because that allows the researchers, the readers, I'm sorry, hang on. The article is written about the data science thing, and then the article and the data science thing itself are reviewed by the reviewers, which allows the readers then to be sure that the data science thing has been checked and quality controlled in exactly the same way that the paper has been checked and quality controlled. And this gives also the people who created the data science thing the academic credit that they deserve for spending all those many years or months or whatever actually looking at and creating this thing in the first place. It also is a really good way of publicising the work you've done producing a software or data sets or whatever. So the other thing that I want to kind of throw out there is this notion of a data science companion paper. So one of the reasons patterns kind of came about was because an awful lot of researchers were finding themselves in the situation where they would write a paper about using a data science methodology on a domain science problem. And the domain science journals would go, meh, too much computer science. And the computer science journals would go, too much domain science. So the people there kind of fell in between those two stools. So Patterns is a very broad scope journal which aims to bring everybody together and deal and kind of help out those people communicate. We also have this notion of sometimes the data science that's in a domain science paper is really, really complicated. So sometimes it might be better off to kind of hive off the data science section of it as a companion paper to the domain science paper. So you'll have the situation where the domain science gets described really well, the data science gets described really well, and the reader gets to choose which one they're more interested in, whether they're just interested in the domain science and the results, or whether they really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the data science. Anyway, content, what we're looking for, pretty much anything you could think of. If you fancy having a chat with me, I'm around for the rest of the conference. Please do. I always love talking to people about their data science because that's really cool. Yeah, so come talk to me. Because Patterns is very much broad scope, it can be quite difficult for readers to actually determine, well, where is this particular bit of data science that's being described, where does it fit in terms of how ready is it to be implemented in other domains? Is it something that I can pull off the shelf and just use automatically to solve my own problem or not? So we've come up with data science maturity levels, which are based on NASA's technology readiness levels. But basically, they're just a kind of a numerical score that says whether the data science that's been described is just the concept, it's the basic principles, something that's never really been implemented before but is potentially of interest. And then it goes all the way up to mainstream. The data science output is well understood and nearly universally known. So we're talking about kind of things like DOIs and things like that when we're talking about mainstream stuff. Okay, so We've been publishing for 2 years. I'm pleased to say that we have had quite a wide selection of happy authors as a result as well, so just passing that on. It's always very gratifying to kind of get this sort of feedback. So, and of course, all credit and praise has to go to our reviewer pool as well, without whom we would find things even more difficult than we do at the moment. Reviewers are the backbone of the peer review system, and we couldn't do it without them, so we really appreciate you all. Everyone who's been a reviewer, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. All right, the previous speaker also mentioned the FAIR principles. We are very keen on the FAIR principles, and I also like to point out the Errant Science cartoon used in my slide at the moment. Thank you. And the reason we're so keen on the FAIR principles is because that notion, that firmly held belief that data are the fundamental foundations of scientific research, right? If you don't have data, your research isn't reproducible, and therefore it's not actually science at all, really, when you think about it. So we're very keen on promoting FAIR. We also are very keen on the CARE principles as well, which is all about looking at the collective benefit, the authority to control, the responsibility and the ethics involved in data. We don't want to just have situations where people go swooping into a marginalised community, take all the data and swoop out again and then publish. We need to have those conversations about the people involved, who's being discussed and how the data is collected in the first place. Right. I'm not going to go into the data availability statements, just to say that we have them, and it's very important that we have them. We also promote sharing data in trusted repositories, whether they're institutional ones, domain-specific ones, or the large generalist repositories and stuff like that. We do also recommend sharing data or sharing software via GitHub, but when it comes to the point in time when the article is published, we ask that our authors deposit a frozen snapshot of their code in the GitHub repository at that particular moment, and they automatically deposit it into Zenodo, and you can get a DOI. And this is a really, really quick and easy way of doing things, because you literally go to GitHub and press a button. It's that simple. But this means that once the code has been frozen and is deposited in Zenodo, the researchers can then go and keep moving on with their GitHub repository and doing things to it. And we don't have to worry about kind of reverting all the changes back to the date of the paper being published in order to be able to kind of check out on the verifiability and the reproducibility and stuff like that. Okay. Just a side thing, there's a tendency for people to say in data availability statements, data and code are available from the lead contact upon reasonable request. And I love that particular phrase in the kind of I don't really love it sort of way, because the question is, what does reasonable request actually mean? Very good question. And also, what happens 20 years from now when the lead contact has retired, moved, their data has been stored on an archaic format that nobody can read anymore? That's the sort of thing. So that's why we really encourage researchers to make their data available and fair. And we also acknowledge the fact that it's hard work for researchers to do this. We really do appreciate this, we do. Anyway, quick statement about open data. Obviously, not all data can be made open and available to absolutely everybody in the world. There are restrictions that we've got to be careful about. There are sensitivities. Human data in particular is really quite sensitive at all. But I tend to default to the as open as possible, as closed as necessary way of thinking about things. Regardless of whether the data and code are open to everybody or not, the reviewers need to have access for quality control and checking. That is a non-negotiable as far as we're concerned, because if the reviewers can't check the data and they can't check if they can't even determine whether the data and code exists, then who knows, there is no foundations to the results that are being presented. Right. We're also interested in the personal side of data science. The people behind the data, the art and music that can get made by data as well. The performance last night was an absolutely wonderful expression of how you can use AI to generate things that have never been generated before. And they are a wonderful fusion of human and machine in terms of creativity. And I think last night the pieces were really very, very beautiful. So yeah, and basically Patterns is all about sharing knowledge, okay? We want to share the stories of the things that went wrong or not so right so that others can learn from them. My second last slide. We are also currently recruiting, so if you have or know of anyone who would be interested in joining the team as a full-time scientific editor, then please do let me know. Come and have a chat. I'm more than happy to arrange Zoom calls or whatever. At the moment, we're a very small team. It's just the two of us. Sahar is our bio and life sciences expert, and I cover everything else. So having somebody else in the team would be very, very handy indeed. So yeah, if you're interested, come have a chat with me. Lovely stuff. And I'm going to end there with my traditional quote, which says that, by Graham Steele, that says that publishing research without data is simply advertising, not science. Thank you very much.